Oregon fans, what's going on? How's everybody doing? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. We are live on YouTube. YouTube.com/Oregon Football. Max Torres is where you can find us. Well, everybody, this is the moment you've all been waiting for because it's not just me on the show. I am joined on this very special episode, the Husky Hate Week live stream, by my good friends Spencer McLaughlin. You know him. He's the host of Locked On Ducks, Locked On Pac-12. And, of course, Rian Winter, a.k.a. Sports Chat 503. Boys, how we doing? Great to see you.
Gosh, we are rocking and rolling. I'm once again fresh off a play-by-play broadcast, and I got good reviews on the nice clothes, and I was already rocking the green tie, so I thought, you know what? Let's go Bill O'Reilly style. F it. We'll do it live. It's one of
love
my
that.
favorite. That's one of my favorite things in the entire world. Just as someone who does play-by-play and camera stuff, that is the funniest freaking thing in the entire. I watch it like every week, and I laugh every.
He went from Portland, Oregon, to that.
Did he really?
Yeah, he was
I had no idea.
He was a news guy in Portland, for sure. Look him up. Bill O'Reilly is crazy. Yeah, I love that too.
That's interesting.
He's like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Portland.
I've seen that 1,000 times.
Portland from one of the to being one of the biggest.
Inside Edition. Inside Edition was like
news. It
wasn't to Fox News. It was to Inside Edition first. That was at Inside Edition.
And then he made.
He's like, what do you mean play our way out? What do you?
To end the show? All right, go. All
right, people.
And then he's just so mad at the teleprompter. It's the greatest thing. I could go for 10 minutes, but we're here to talk the Ducks.
Yes, thank you, Max. You're doing great. Spencer, thank you so much. You guys are awesome.
It's always a pleasure. We've been teasing this for a good while. People have commented on, my appearance on Max's show, or when Ryan's been on my show, like, oh, you guys should get together with Max. And when we were planning out, we were like, man, it's got to be Washington, right? Even more than Oregon State, it's got to be Washington.
Yeah, this felt like it was the perfect time. I mean, I'm going to be back in Eugene for this game. Spencer, I'm bummed you can't make it. But I'll have to make sure I say what's up to Ryan at some point.
Connect. I'm fired up.
But yeah, I think just, general theme of this, obviously, like I said, Husky Hate Week live stream. So any Duck football we want to talk about, rivalry stuff. I thought kind of a cool way, we're starting to get some people in the chat already, but I thought a cool way to maybe start things off was to get your guys' thoughts on, what the rivalry means to you, because I didn't get on to Oregon football until around 2012. And then I try to take more of a journalist perspective. So I thought it'd be cool to kind of get your guys' stories and, what the rivalry means to you as Duck fans.
Yeah, Ryan can start. He's the savvy veteran here. He's seen more of these than both of us combined.
Well, I mean, I'm also a history teacher. You don't want to go too far down the line. It started in 1900. 43-0. Now, I think the important thing about the Oregon-Washington rivalry is it's just like any of these great rivalries we see across the country, right? That are not in-state rival, the interstate rival, right? The Michigan-Ohio, the Florida-Georgia, the Texas-Alabama, or Texas-Oklahoma, whatever you want, Alabama-LSU. Freaking, all these are great rivalries, and Oregon-Washington has something special. The reason why I think they have something special is because in the modern era, there's been kind of two different sides of this. Washington was good, and then Oregon's been good. And they really have not been good at the same time. And there's only been a couple games, maybe 5-6 games at the most in the 120 years they played, where both teams were pretty good at the same time. And so when Oregon was good, they beat the heck out of them. I mean, when Washington was good, they beat the heck out of the Ducks. So I grew up at a time where, as a kid, Washington was awesome. Steve Entman era. I mean, I saw these guys just destroy the Ducks. My dad's joke was in the 70s, when my dad was there, was they would play tequila when they'd score a touchdown. And the band would be playing tequila. They'd kick off to the Ducks. The Ducks would turn it over, or Washington would get the ball again, score again. Band never even stopped playing tequila. Like the whole damn second half, it was like the band never even stopped playing. That's demoralizing. And so that's why the Kenny Wheaton going to score is such an important deal, because that was when I was a junior in high school. I mean, it bring a tear to my eye, that team, because that's such a valuable part of my life at that point as a Duck fan, because we finally made it. It was like when you were a kid and you were waiting to jump off the diving board. It was like it took forever to get in that line. You're freezing, and then you finally get to it and you're like, here's our chance. Like, we're doing it. And at that point, we didn't really know what was going to happen as a Duck fan. Since then, they kicked the hell out of the Huskies, beat the living crap out of these guys over and over and over and over, to the point where I would go up to Seattle every other year. I've been to like probably over 20, or maybe, I don't even know how many, probably over 20 of these games, at least. Oh shit, probably 30 more. I have seen the Huskies destroy the Ducks. That's why that Kenny Wheaton game was so important, because they were going to do the same thing they've done to us year after year after year, which is go down the field and score at the end. The Ducks get the pick. Boom, boom. But I was up there in Seattle where these guys were just like, I mean, I was during the year where they didn't win. I mean, it was like, dude, bro, it's like, you want to talk about a demoralized team. They didn't win. They didn't even beat the Cougs, who also didn't win. So it's like, dude, Huskies have had some bad times, and I've seen it front and center. The Ducks have just absolutely creamed them. And so it feels really good right now to kind of be in this situation where both teams are pretty good. We've had it like this for a little bit now. And I expect great things this weekend, buddy.
I think my favorite new iteration is Oregon players going like W's, dogs down.
I love that.
Penei Sewell did it coming out of the tunnel of his NFL game. And I saw that and thought, oh my gosh, just when I couldn't love that guy even more. That is fantastic. I think what makes a great rivalry is not about what takes place on the field, but how the fans feel about one another. And I was talking on my podcast for today's show with Rob Mosley, which was awesome. Rob's a great guy, about what's different between the Washington rivalry and the Oregon State rivalry. And he brought up a really good point, which is that Oregon State, there's plenty of animosity there. There's plenty of beef. Want to beat the Beavs, hate losing to the Beavs. All that stuff still applies. But I think at some level, there's an understanding between the two programs, or one program and one program now, that it wasn't always a situation where one of the teams could win, because they were both small, geographically isolated. Like the 80s and 90s were not that good until, Bellotti really got things cooking. Like Rich Brooks did a lot of great things for Oregon, but go look at his record year by year. There were a lot of down years, and then it started to get better at the end. Bellotti takes over and then really, really takes off. So I think that what makes it different than Washington is there's no almost like underlying level, however small, of respect for the other team that you share a state with, right? I mean, the Ducks and the Beavs, they're both kind of out here. They weren't powers. Oregon obviously is now, but Washington was the top dog. And Washington, no pun intended, but you can take it however you like. Washington was on top for a long time, and both Oregon and Oregon State were down here. And then Oregon has risen and surpassed Oregon State by a lot, but they were both in that same spot, and they're both in the same state. And I'm sure you guys have this too. I have a number of friends who are like some of my oldest, closest friends who are Beaver fans. Other than my cousin and my uncle who are Huskies, and my mom, of course, but we'll put that off to the side for now. Other than that, I don't have any close friends who are also Husky fans. So like, I want to beat the Beavs to be able to talk smack to my friends there and such. But at the same time, like when an Oregon, like when the Blazers signed Gary Payton II, I look at it and go, oh, that's cool. They got a Beav. Or Brandon Cooks in the NFL, or when Sean Mannion makes an appearance, right? Guys like that who I've grown up watching in that rivalry formerly known as the Civil War. There's that little bit of underlying respect where, like, when the Bees get to the pro level, or when they do something good, if they're not playing Oregon, I will kind of root for them from time to time. I don't know how popular that makes me with Duck fans. Hopefully I have some credibility built up on that front. But with Washington, it's just not like that. I don't feel that at all, ever. I don't care about Huskies that go on to the pros. I don't want Washington to win. Like, it's just pure dislike. And one of my favorite pictures, I should actually try and track it down. I probably could. It was me at a Husky game. I was are we G-rated on this show, Max? Yeah.
Yeah, I like to err on the side of caution.
Okay, I was kind of being a tool because I was at Husky Stadium for the Vernon Adams game up there, and
Oh,
I'll find the picture of the moment after the game-winning interception when I was basking in the glory of the game we're going to win. So one of you guys can pick it up while I look for it because it'll take me a second. But I think that's the biggest difference is when we're not playing the Beavs. I can root for the Beavs. I don't often, but from time to time I will. I've never once rooted for Washington, like ever. Like Washington, Oregon State, I wanted Oregon State to win. Easy. I think most Duck fans probably feel the same way.
yeah, and I think just to kind of wrap up the background before we like really dig into the show a little bit. It was interesting because when I started following Oregon, like I said, around 2012 or so, just 2 years after that, I've only been to 2 Oregon UW games. It was 2014 with Marcus in Autzen. I think it was a 45-20 win. And then it was last year on the road in Seattle on a cold, windy, stormy night. But that was just super, super fun. And, I got to go to that game. I went to that game as a fan. I wasn't working that game. And I got to experience the Husky fans, throwing breadcrumbs at the Oregon fans. So it's I guess something I'm a little bit newer to, but I think it's just like, Oregon fans have been so used to dominating this rivalry. And then when Chris Peterson, towards the tail end of his tenure, they ended up going to the playoffs and they were really dominant when Oregon was just way down. But now it's a little bit of a new feeling because you have 2 first-year head coaches or new coaches. Spencer's got the pic of him with the looks like with some Washington
that's a Husky
fans.
fan there. If you can't see, he is giving me the bird hard because I'm just taking a selfie Snapchat, just like go Ducks, baby, woo! And he's just throwing me a nice little middle finger that he thinks is subtle. That should be like my contact picture on the YouTube channel or something. I don't know. I should make that the thumbnail for every broadcast this week. Though my bosses at Locked On probably wouldn't like that very much.
Yeah.
Oh man. No, it's a fun week, man. I agree with what Spencer's saying. I love the Oregon State Washington game. Every year it's one of my favorite games of the entire schedule, and I always root for the Beavs. I have never once in my life rooted for the Huskies in that game. And there's something about, though, the fact that Huskies were really good. And that's the reason why this rivalry has been good. People talk about the need for both teams to be good to make a rivalry good. And that's true. But in Oregon, Washington's case, they really haven't been good at the same time very much. I think that's the cool thing about what's happening right now is that, you'd have a top 25. I don't know if they've had more than about 5 matchups where they've been both top 25. And I don't know what stat that is to look up, but
I'll see if I can find it.
They just haven't been good really at the same time. So the Huskies were always like, oh, dude, the Ducks sucks. Like, yeah, we know. And then when the Ducks were good and they were beating the hell out of the Huskies, we were like, dude, the Huskies sucks. Like, yeah, we know. I mean, I used to go up there and be like, hey, good luck, guys. We're like, we're going to need it. I mean, this is the mighty Huskies. This is the equivalent in our conference of like Texas or Oklahoma or like USC, like some of the greatest college football teams of all time. We were being promoted. We're from Seattle. And so this idea that like Oregon was trying to like get there, they were like chasing that. And then we kind of did get that. And that pissed the Huskies off even more, which made the rivalry even better. We loved this.
Yeah.
So it's a phenomenal situation to be where we're at right now. And I actually like, I got chills actually kind of thinking about listening to Cristobal when he was all fired up last year. Because I was at that game too, Max, and I was freaking lit for that game. But there was a lot of energy in that building. And for whatever reason, there was weird stuff going on that night because the freaking Huskies were fighting each other on their side and the Ducks came in. That was when Kayvon Thibodeau was recording in the locker room, and he recorded all the stuff that I don't think Cristobal would want anyone to hear at all how tight he was. And dude, it was like real stuff because they'd come off the year before, whereas all the COVID stuff, and they were pissed because, they thought the Ducks shouldn't have gone and they should have gone, but they didn't have a defense.
Well,
their entire defensive line was out for COVID.
Ryan, the Ducks clearly shouldn't have gone. We didn't have the academic prowess to go to the Pac-12 championship.
But there was just so much built up in that last year's game. The energy was like really
through
weird.
the roof.
Like, it was wild, man. It was wild. So and it's all rainy, classic Montlake. Oh, dude,
Yeah.
it fires me up even thinking about this game every single time. And this is going to be a great one, dude. The weather's going to be awesome. It's going to be 4 o'clock. You're going to get the beautiful sunset. It's just going to be like picture perfect in the valley.
Yeah,
And Ryan,
it should be great. If I can just interject real quick, Max. I think there have been a lot of matchups in the last 15 years where Washington has been solid to good, but
Yeah.
they haven't been great when Oregon's been great. Like when the Ducks have beaten them, last 3 matchups all decided by single digits. I mean, they have been close games, and Washington has been a good team that could have beaten Oregon, but the Ducks just came out on top. And I think the best matchup, frankly, was 2018. You had the Ducks at 17, had that Stanford mishap earlier in the year, but that was the redemption game. That kind of felt like the true reemergence of Oregon after getting down, losing, was it 8 and 13, the bowl game, 14 games in the previous 2 years. That felt like the moment where Oregon kind of reemerged with that CJ Verdell walk-off touchdown. One of the coolest moments. I remember exactly.
One of the best calls.
Dude, and
Yeah,
I've never,
yeah,
in
McDonough's
all
great.
my years sitting where I sit, I've never jumped the partition and jumped onto the field. We literally just were like, sorry, security. We just boom. We're like on the field.
Yep.
And I've never done that in any. Yeah. We've never done that, and that's saying something.
Yeah, that game, that crowd was awesome. That game was awesome. I was actually in London at that time. I was up at, gosh, it must have been 2, 3 in the morning. I don't know how I didn't get a noise complaint. I was yelling. I was just I was watching.
Well, they missed the field goal.
I know. I was expecting that field goal from Peyton Henry to go in, and
we're just
Cristobal calls the timeouts, and he hooked it, and I was like, oh my gosh, they Maldonado'd it.
Yeah,
holy smokes.
Never been more excited about a missed field goal in my life.
Holy smokes, we have a chance. And then they go to overtime, and by the way, the walk-off touchdown gets all the hype. Don't overlook the fact that Oregon's kicking game that year was kind of shaky. I think that was Adam Stack, and he was really inconsistent. Schneider
no, that was
Camden.
Left. Wasn't that?
No, Camden was a freshman the following year.
I'm thinking the Washington State game.
I'm pretty sure it was Adam Stack, and he was not in a great place kicking wise.
Oregon's never been known for the kicking game.
Well, there have been a couple kickers who have actually been really good.
I know
it's been very
over the years.
Over the years, I'm with you. Yeah, Maldonado's not great. Stack was hit and miss. I thought Rob Beard was solid. Morgan Flint was good. Schneider was good. Yeah. Lewis has been streaky, but now he actually is pretty darn good. But the underrated play in that Washington game in 2018, 3rd and 11, Herbert throws a dart from the near hash mark outside to the far numbers to Dylan Mitchell on 3rd and 11.
Dylan Mitchell was so good, dude.
To get us into the scoring range, and ultimately they punched it in. But if we don't convert that, we have to kick a field goal, and we had missed a field goal already in that game. I do not know if Oregon makes that. That was an underrated play from that game, but that walk-off moment, very Cristobal-esque to run the ball on 3rd and goal from the 5, but it worked out because Washington was sitting in 2 deep safety coverage, and they cleared it out, and the offensive line cleared a lane, and Verdell pounded it in. It was bonkers, man.
It was absolutely bonkers, and the energy in that stadium that day was
so good.
Yeah, that's for my son the equivalent of the Kenny Wheaton's going to score. I mean, that was the energy in the stadium, the way it erupted, but to end it like that, end it with that in overtime,
at home too. And the other thing too about that is, I'm sure Husky fans, after the blowout wins, one of which was ugly, one of which I don't even remember because Braxton Burmeister was playing, who, by the way, if you didn't know, just got converted to a wide receiver at San Diego State. So that's what you call a whiff on a 4-star quarterback recruit. He couldn't work at Virginia Tech, couldn't get the job at San Diego State. He's a good athlete, so now he's a wide receiver. But I'm sure Husky fans in those 2016, 17 years when they just blew us out felt like, all right, we're reestablishing the world order here. Huskies are back on top. Huskies are back to dominating Oregon. Washington's doing this. I bet you could find 100 pieces from the Husky circles about all that sort of stuff. And it's hard not to feel that when you have that history, right? When Washington was so dominant, and then they're getting back into it, or so they think, and then Oregon comes with 3 straight single-digit wins. Last year was by 10, but I suppose not by single digits. It was going to be, and then they snapped it over the head because they were punting on 4th and 10, which is hilarious in and of itself. I remember I was coming back from a trip with the SU football team, doing some radio stuff for him, and I was watching the end of that game, and I remember thinking, like, I mean, I guess you're really deep, and maybe you could get a stop, and we punt it back, but like this just seems like you have to go for it. And then they snapped it over the head. I just burst out laughing. I was just like, no, you didn't do that, did you? Like you made a conservative play call and then you messed up the conservative play call. Like, do you probably lose the game anyway? Yeah, but the optics were pretty funny.
Spencer, to give some context, I know you're talking about Adam Stack in the 2018 game. So Adam Stack in 2018 for Oregon, I'm looking at the stats right now. He was 6 for 10 for as a field goal kicker. So not terrible, but not as consistent as you would want. And I think another thing with
you remember the losses, right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I think another thing with this Oregon rivalry that's kind of interesting. So we talked about Dan Lanning first year at Oregon, Kalen DeBoer first year at Washington. Both teams are playing well. I think this is interesting because not only is Oregon starting this really tough 3-game stretch to end the season, with playoff talk getting louder and louder each week, but not only that, it's a must-win game. But what I'm kind of curious to bring to the table here, how fans are going to judge Dan Lanning, seeing that this is a really, really big game. It's his first taste of the rivalry, and he said a lot of good things throughout the week, saying don't play to the circumstances, don't play to the occasion. We've done things correctly this season, so we're going to keep doing what's worked for us. But at the same time, he's acknowledging rivalries exist. We know this game means more, and he wants to kind of leave a good impression walking away from his first Oregon-Washington rivalry. So there's a lot of interesting storylines kind of around this game, and I think based on how Oregon's played so far this season, you have good reason to be confident they can come away with a win. But it's just another interesting dynamic when you think about what this game means for Dan Lanning and his perception as a head coach, seeing that this game comes when it does in the season.
Yeah, and I think for DeBoer, he's not hiding the fact that this is a big rivalry too. He was asked about it, and he gave what I thought was a really great quote. Like, if I were a Washington fan, I would love hearing that. But he said, I don't think I've been to a speaking engagement anywhere where I don't hear from at least one person about how important it is that we beat Oregon. Like,
I love that.
And by the way, I love that both coaches are into it. Like, I'm all about the smoke in college football everywhere you go. I want to play big games. I want rivalries to be heated. I want teams to be good. Like, is it fun to beat up on USC when they're down? Sure. But you know what's even more fun? When USC is good and you go into the Coliseum and you run for, what was it? Is Kenyon Barner still running? He might be. I don't know. It's 320 yards. I've never seen a performance like those are the days that I live for in college football, those specific Saturdays in the fall. So, is it fun to see Washington get down? Yeah, at some level, but it's more fun to beat them convincingly when they are good. The Chip Kelly games when they would win like 50-20. Those weren't bad Husky teams. They were ranked a couple times, but Oregon was just better. And I think that this game feels very much like that, where Washington is a solid team. Will probably end I think they'll end the year 9-3, 8-4, depending on how they're playing going into that end of the year game at Pullman against Washington State, which we know is a tough place to play. But overall, it's another top 25 matchup where Oregon's way ahead of Washington. And I think Washington presents a challenge in a number of ways, as we'll start to get to here, I'm sure, in a little bit. But I think it's a chance to kind of remind Washington that Oregon is still a top dog at the moment.
Yeah, I texted my buddy here, who's alum of UW, and I just said, "Hey, what are your thoughts on the game? This week." He says, "Don't give us a ton of a chance." And this again, these guys speak very highly most of all the time, right? Right?
Yeah.
They've got the national championships. What's this stand for? Oh yeah, we've heard that forever.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
0-0 national championships.
He says, he says, I think the 13.5 is a little steep. He said, we shall see. I think this game's gonna be close, man. I think the Huskies are gonna do what they want to do. I think they're gonna take advantage of what's been susceptible a little bit with the Duck defense this year. I think there's some weakness on the back end a little bit they can take advantage of. Penny's going to throw the thing all over the place. I like how he throws. I like a lefty. I like seeing how they get rid of it. I like a lefty in basketball too. They just got a nice little touch, and he gets it. He gets rid of it quick, and doesn't move in the pocket a tremendous amount. He wants to stay in there. He wants to throw the ball. You can tell he's waiting for the last second. He's waiting for everything to open up. That's a danger zone against the Ducks. We've been burned by quarterbacks like that. I mean, look at the Washington State game, right? I mean, it was like, dude, Cam Ward looked like a freaking NFL MVP in that game. So we've had some issues there. So I think that the Duck defense is going to have their hands full a little bit. And I think Oregon's offense is going to be a true test for Washington's defense. I think Washington's defense is one of these weird teams that's like on paper they look good, stats wise they look good, but on the film they don't look that good. It's kind of like as a teacher, you got a lot of students who turn in all their assignments. They got an A in class, but you give them the test and you're like, dude, you don't know much of this information, do you? So it's this idea where it's like, I don't know. I think Oregon can take advantage of the defense. And I think Oregon's offense is just humming right now to the point where I think they're going to be a problem for any defense outside of Georgia.
Yeah, and I don't think that we've seen some super dominant efforts from UW so far on as far as their defense so far this year. They gave up 45 points to Arizona State. They gave up 39 to Arizona. So they're definitely susceptible there. And 28 to Michigan State. But Michigan State has kind of fallen apart since that game earlier on in the year. But to your point, Ryan, I think I totally agree. I don't really see – there's only a handful of defenses I think that can really slow down Oregon's offense right now because they're just operating at that high of a clip right now. You got Bo Heisman, you got the offensive line, you have a running back who – a backfield that feels like try it out whoever you want. Pick your poison. It doesn't really feel like there's any drop-off, in my opinion, between Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington. I was doing a radio hit earlier this week, and I was asked who the best player on the team is other than Bo, and I said Bucky Irving. I just really, really like how he's playing this year,
he's awesome.
At least on the offensive side of the ball for sure. But to talk about Washington a little bit, I think their offense definitely has some really solid weapons. Just looking at some of the stat leaders, you got Jalen McMillan, you got Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, as well as Giles Jackson. Who was kind of formerly recruited by Oregon. Seems like he's a little bit more of a gadget guy, but they got a good mixture of some guy like, McMillan and Odunze. They're both long, athletic guys, great hands. Those are the kind of go-to guys from a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. But, Polk and Jackson, they do their thing and contribute as well. But yeah, it almost feels like it's an air raid kind of attack with how many times they have Penix, dropping back to throw the ball. And, there's reason to be a little bit, cautious if you're an Oregon fan, seeing that teams have been able to pass the ball on them pretty well. But at the same time, you have an Oregon defense that's been, forcing turnovers, making plays, doing enough to get by. But I think that when you think about that, DJ Johnson, Taki Taimani, we got to see if those guys are able to give it a go this week.
Yeah, I think defensively, Oregon should expect to see the ball through the air, because if I'm Washington, Kalen DeBoer, and their OC Ryan Grubb, who I think is really smart, by the way. I believe Grubb is the play caller. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it is Grubb and DeBoer is the head coach. And, they were exceptional last week on third down against Oregon State. It won them the game. It won them that game. They had a third and goal from the 24. They converted. The Beavers had a coverage bust. They had 3rd and 11, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10. They had a 4th and 10. They converted so many situations, and they had guys who were just running wide open. And the thing that worries me the most going up against this Washington team is that they're going to throw the ball a lot. They should, if they're smart, because if Washington, that doesn't run the football exceptionally well, they have a couple times, but it's pretty streaky. If you try to run the ball on Oregon offensively, you're not going to have that much success. But if you try to throw the ball and you're going 60-40 pass, that's how you move the ball on the Ducks this year, and that's what Washington has done really well. The key for the Ducks is the pass rush. You have got, if you let Michael Penix sit back there, pat the ball a couple times, and just slice and dice, he will pick you apart. He will go for 350 and 3 touchdowns. Make no mistake about it. He's been way better than I expected him to be after watching him at Indiana, where I thought he was okay, but not great. He's not a super mobile guy. He's got an injury history, so I think that's kind of limited his mobility. But that Washington offensive line has done an outstanding job keeping him in the pocket, keeping him upright, and letting him distribute to these wide receivers. They use the tight end from time to time, but Odunze, McMillan, and Polk, those are dudes. Or Oregon secondary is going to have their hands full, and they won't have Jamal Hill for the first half.
Yeah, that'll hurt him. Yeah, those penalties that linger into the next game, I got a tough time with a little bit. I think that's a little excessive. I get what they're trying to do with it.
But if you don't have anything malicious on the play, you shouldn't throw a kid out for targeting at any point in time. I'm going to repeat this until I die, or until they change this rule. It's so dumb. The NFL doesn't throw guys out of the game for targeting. We're holding college kids to a higher standard. There's no other college football rule where you hold the college kids to a higher standard. Clock stops after a first down to give them more time. You only have to get 1 foot down. You don't have to touch someone to get them on the ground. Like, everything is set up in college to be a little bit easier to play with some little specific rules. And then with this critically important one, both from a player safety and an impact on the field, because you're taking guys off the field perspective with targeting, you're making it significantly more punitive, to where guys are not just out of a game, but if it's in the second half, they have to miss the first half of the next game. It's the most backwards BS crap from the NCAA. It drives me absolutely nuts. And we're going to need Bennett Williams to play a lot and step up. And I believe in Bennett, but I'd certainly rather have Jamal out there and available in the first half than not.
And Brian Addison's healthy again. He'll be great back there. There's a lot of help. And get the young guys up. Old coach speak is this far deep in the season, they aren't freshmen anymore. So you got to get some of these guys to get some playing time. But I'm excited as hell for this game. I do think Oregon will win, and I think it'll be a great one. I think it'll be a huge notch in their belt, because, again, I think, looking at the national scheme, I'm kind of one of these guys that says on my channel, hey, man, Rose Bowl should be the target. I don't think it's national championship or bust every year, but it feels like now they're printing out invitations, and we might have a name on one of those bad boys. And now if you get invited to the party, you better be dressed up like Spencer and get there. And I think that could be exactly, dude, suited and duded. And I think it could be a situation where the Ducks, find themselves in that position. I mean, who the hell would have thought that those two teams would have both gone down, Clemson, Alabama, in the same day? Hadn't happened in freaking 8 years or something. I think I heard 2014 or 13 or something. That's pretty wild. That's almost a decade. So the idea is that it's rare that this kind of stuff happens, where the Pac-12 would even be in a mention nationally. And then the Pac-12 has shown up this year. They did what they needed to do. They put teams in the top 25. They put teams in the top 10. They had quality wins. They had wins outside of conference. Well, that's what we were dying for the last couple of years, right? And now we just got to really follow through and get some bowl victories out of it this year. And I think it's going to be a great bowl season as well. I'm a believer in the bowls. That's kind of why I love
bowl season. I
love bowl season, and I'm not a gambler either. But it's a good thing, I think. And I think there's going to be a lot of really good matchups. And even that Rose Bowl, if Oregon doesn't show up there, and if they do have that Big Ten loser of Michigan or Ohio State, that's going to be a hell of a matchup.
Yeah, I agree.
So, but I think there's going to be a lot of conversation the next couple of weeks about, if you let in a one-loss non-conference champion SEC school, why can't you do it for the Big Ten? Especially now, there's this huge push with the Big Ten, all the money behind it, all the cachet that goes along with it. And I think the Big 12's like, hey, but what about us? We might have a one-loss champion too, And so I don't know. I think it's going to be a situation where Oregon's still got to find themselves in the right place at the right time. Even if they win out, I still don't think it's automatic.
Yeah, and I want to stay on Ryan's point for a second about Alabama and Clemson losing in the same weekend.
Clemson stinks.
I was already thinking about with heading into this season.
Sorry, that's just a bad football team. They're just not bad, but they're not that good. Sorry, Max, keep going.
No, you're good. You're good. So yeah, with Alabama and Clemson losing, it's a window of opportunity for Oregon. I was already thinking about this kind of along these lines when it was announced that USC and UCLA were going to the Big Ten. The Pac-12 was already, relatively weak, especially because Bama and Clemson lost. Now is your time to capitalize. Yes. You're being given a really, really good opportunity here. and an opportunity to shut up the doubters because you have these tough games on your schedule. But if you're Oregon, you want to say, okay, good. Now it's our time to rise to the occasion again. Because I think some people maybe don't think Oregon is as strong as others, as in the Duck community, because they have 2 ranked wins so far on the year, whereas some of these other top schools like in the SEC have more than that, which just comes with playing in a better conference. They haven't played a super difficult road game, and I'm not trying to be critical of Oregon here. I'm just kind of maybe playing a little bit devil's advocate and trying to get some of the other picture in here. But now you have a chance to really just hammer home, yes, this is a team that is capable of great things. This is a team that is not what they were on September 3rd in Atlanta. They've grown, they've matured, they've changed. And I just think this is an awesome opportunity for Oregon to really show up and to do it in Lanning's first year. I think that winning out is very much doable. You just have to take it one game at a time, and you can't get too ahead of yourselves because they've shown that they should be able to compete and really beat any team in this conference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is what's fun about the fans. The fans get to get into this. And I had this conversation all the time about the 12-team playoff. And I said, well, you're going to cut into this now. Now, all this discussion that we're going to have is going to be postponed because they're going to let everybody in. You're not even going to worry about the top. They're going to worry about who's 13 or 14. Well, that's not as big of a deal as 5 or 6. Come on. No, so the way I look at it is, this is a situation. The Ducks have it perfectly primed. The ACC looks like they're completely out. They're at 10. The Big 12 looks like they're teetering because you got to have TCU win out to be there. If they have one loss, it feels like they get pushed to the back of the line. Because the Ducks lost early, if they win out, they're going to be the team that has the most cachet, the most wins anywhere outside of the SEC or the Big 10. And unless they just put 2 SEC schools and 2 Big 10 schools in there, the Ducks are going to have a seat at the table. Now, the crazy part is thinking about what would happen if it goes like that. You're either getting a rematch with Georgia in the freaking Peach Bowl of all places, going back to Atlanta. Talk about PTSD. Again, the Peaches were good. I had a fantastic time. And I know this show's PG, so I can't explain everything that happened after the game, but it was a great time in Atlanta. Now, the idea was the game was horrible, like so bad, and it's going to be used against the Ducks so much in the next coming months or next coming weeks, whatever. But I do think that if it was to work out, that you could possibly play Ohio State in Glendale. Oh my Lord, sign me up. Whoa, dude, that game would be a huge
drop everything
home run.
Go.
Yeah. That'd be a huge home run for ESPN. Oh Lord, people would go for bonkers over that. And so I think it's just a fun time right now. The way its schedule works out, I could be no more excited about college football than I am right now, 2022. I mean, this is literally a volcano right now, it feels like.
By the way, Ryan, if that comes to pass, which I would obviously be so down for, playing Ohio State, it's Peach and Fiesta this year, right?
Yeah.
Or the
and then the championship game's in SoFi. So what would happen if Oregon won the first game and they played Georgia on the West Coast for the championship?
Oh man,
bookend.
that would be something. But I'll just say if they're in Glendale, we might have to meet up and get a round of golfing together,
bro.
When that's
in the
when
Mecca of West Coast golf, basically desert golf.
I know. I'm a fan. It's so different from the Pacific Northwest, but I think the path for Oregon is really, really good, and it keeps getting there. And Max, I think you brought up a great point about Clemson, Alabama both lose. Looks like neither's going to be in the playoff. Bama could still technically get there, but it's unlikely, though not impossible. LSU only a 3-point favorite at Arkansas this week. Take the Hogs and the points if you're a gambler out there. But I think that when you look at Woo Pig Suey, baby. When you look at the
what does that mean?
The path,
that's
it's just
like
Arkansas's.
No, I know, but like, what does it actually mean? Is my question.
Shit, dude,
what's the story?
Idea. Woo Pig Suey is.
I can just look it up. I don't know why.
I think it's got a farming route. I don't know. I've heard it many
hunting.
times before.
Hunting.
Or it could be hunting. I love it, honestly. Like when Arkansas gets into the NCAA tournament, like they're a great tournament team. Musselman's a great coach.
Dude.
Musselman's a hilarious coach.
Arkansas beat my Zags, man.
Dude, I grew up with 40 minutes of hell.
That's because
I love the old team, man. Arkansas team back in the day was good.
Yeah, but anyway, on Oregon's playoff path, it does feel like there's an opportunity with no Alabama or Clemson, but I really don't see it as that different than another college football year because you don't have Alabama and Clemson, no, but Georgia is kind of the Alabama of this season, right? Or the Clemson of this season. Ohio State is still there. And in terms of getting help from other teams, I've said on my show a number of times, and it continues to be true, if you just hold serve, do what you need to do what you can do, help is often given to those in college football who just keep winning.
Right.
Look at Cincinnati last year. They were not going to get into the playoff. Oklahoma State was. But then guess what happened? Oklahoma State came up that short against Baylor in the Big 12 championship game. And then what do you know? Cincinnati's into the playoff. If that doesn't happen, the Bearcats aren't in. That's why I like the 14 playoff as is. I am anti-college football playoff expansion across the board. That's a conversation perhaps for another day. But I think the path for Oregon right now looks really good. TCU is interesting. Thought on TCU, and then I'll go to LSU because LSU could be a real wild card here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure. After the first week, I would have said TCU has to be undefeated. But given that they went from, 7 to 4 and are now inside and above Tennessee right now, I don't know if the Horned Frogs would be left out if they're a one-loss conference champion. If they're a one-loss non-conference champion, I think they would get left out. But if they lose a regular season game, say to Texas on Saturday, and then win the Big 12 championship, at the very least, that's going to be comparable if you're doing a side-by-side with Oregon's resume. Because TCU would have a better loss. They won't get blown out 49-3 against Texas. Granted, Georgia's way better than Texas right now, but the optics of that are certainly a part of it. And then you just look at the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and you say, these are pretty comparable leagues. Pac-12 could be a bit stronger, but there's no Grand Canyon-sized gap there. So that's one thing that's interesting to follow. Tennessee losing another game, which unfortunately is not going to happen. They're going to be 11-1.
They're cruising.
I think Oregon needs to be rooting against TCU, and then the Ohio State-Michigan game to really solidify a slot being there for a one-loss Pac-12 champion. You need that to be a blowout in either direction. Doesn't matter.
And I think you should need it to be Ohio State because they've bagged Michigan the whole time for their strength of schedule. So if Michigan wins it,
but although
one loss Ohio State. Oh
yeah, I agree. I think one loss Ohio State gets more respect than one loss Michigan. But the Buckeyes non-conference isn't very good. The Big Ten isn't very good.
No, I know.
It's Ohio State and Michigan are up here.
Right.
Penn State is a step below, and then it's 50 feet of crap. And then there's us.
Hey, how about Illinois, man? Illinois is having a good season.
Illinois is going to get housed so hard by Michigan when they play. I mean, I don't have a beef against the Illini. I'm just saying, that's a fun story. It's not that good of a team. They're not bad, but when Illinois is your fourth best team, who's the fourth best team in the Pac-12 right now? Probably, I don't know, USC or UCLA. What are they doing to Illinois? What are they, a 13-point favorite on a neutral field? Come on, come on now. So I think the Pac-12's got that going for them, and there's a clear path there. And 11-1 Tennessee really feels like it gets in. They've got so many AP top 25 wins. They've got that win over Alabama, who stays in the top 10, and I think should, by the way, not just because they're Bama, but because they've lost their two games by a combined 4 points on a missed field goal and a knuckleball in the same game that got through, and then a late 2-point conversion on the road. But LSU is the team that could snipe Oregon if it comes down to those two. We need LSU to get a third loss, because with 2 losses, you'd think they're out, but they're not. And because you don't have the depth of teams there vying for playoff spots that you would in a normal year, and there is a path for the Pac-12, I don't think in the eyes of the committee, a 2-loss SEC champion is that different than a 1-loss Pac-12 champion. I really, really don't. And I don't know that I could argue that point if they arrived at that conclusion.
All right, I want to reel it in for just a sec because we're already creeping up on an hour a little bit. I think one interesting point or question that comes to mind And we were talking about it a little bit because with expectations, with the Rose Bowl, with the playoff being a potential legitimate possibility if Oregon takes care of their business, I kind of just wanted to bring to the table maybe reassessing or reevaluating what we think our expectations are for this Dan Lanning team, this year compared to the beginning of the year, because I think a lot of people would agree this is as good as you possibly could have expected the first year of Dan Lanning's head coaching tenure at Oregon to be going. I don't think winning the Georgia game was really ever that realistic.
Putting up 17 points would have been a little better.
That would have been nice just to see them compete a little bit. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to bring that to the table. If Oregon, like right now, if they went out, the feeling is that they can go to the playoff. But I think that I've literally seen some of the comments saying, I'd be satisfied with a Rose Bowl game. And then, yeah, Kyle right here says Rose Bowl was the floor for me. So I'm just kind of curious to see where your guys' head's at, because I've said, I think the whole season and even before the season, this is why the timing of Dan Lanning's hiring was so interesting, even more so by the departure of USC and UCLA, because the Pac-12 is weak and you got to capitalize, like we were just saying. So I think that a lot of Oregon fans, and I don't want to call myself a fan, I thought the floor was Rose Bowl or Pac-12 title game appearance, because Oregon's been knocking on the door, recruiting at an elite level, getting good coaches, and it feels like they've been, just coming up short of where they really can get to. So what do we think about that? What's reasonable expectations for the rest of the season? What would be disappointment? What would be acceptable in your guys' eyes?
What do you think, Spence?
The floor is getting to the Pac-12 title game. That's the floor for, I could at least feel okay about it. And then I got to see who the opponent is, because I think each one presents a different challenge for the Ducks. But I mean, the way this offense is playing, and the defense has not been perfect, but the defense doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be an incredible putter to make pars if you can hit it 300 yards down the middle of the fairway. Like, you can just get pretty close to the hole if you're just right there, set up in prime position every time. I think the offense has been doing that, and I don't think Washington's going to be able to hold them under 40 points this week. I think it's got to be a big Bo Nix game, but the weather should allow for that. But I mean, at this point, it would be a borderline collapse if Oregon didn't get to the Pac-12 championship game, because if the loss was to Utah, they'd still have the head-to-head with UCLA, and then the Bruins would just have to beat the Trojans, and tiebreakers get weird and funky and such. But at this point in the season, you're going to be favored in all three of these games. You shouldn't lose more than one, and you're going to have a good opportunity with the way they're playing football right now to win all three. So I think the floor is the Pac-12 championship game, and the ceiling for me from an expectation standpoint is getting to the college football playoff. And then once you're there, again, you got to see the matchup with, I'd feel better against Ohio State than Georgia, of course, because no one wants to play Georgia because they're by far the best team in the country right now. But coming into the year, I expected them to get to the Pac-12 championship game and not necessarily win it. Now it just feels with the way that they're playing that not winning the conference championship would be pretty disappointing. I mean, all this success, this great run, and you'd be fighting for an at-large berth to a New Year's Six. Otherwise, you'd get relegated to the Alamo Bowl. I don't think that could happen necessarily unless Oregon were to go into it with 3 losses. Like, if they end the year at 10-3 in the regular season, they could miss a New Year's Six altogether. So I think that'd be the biggest letdown, is not playing in a New Year's Six or college football playoff game would be disappointing, because the potential for this team to do that is right in front of them.
Yeah, I always kind of just temper it as like, look at it from different perspectives, right? So I think there's kind of multiple different sides of the fan base. There's a side of fan base that actively is in here, going to games, doing that sort of stuff. There's fan base that, kind of just look on the periphery every once in a while to kind of check the score a little bit, and kind of everybody in between, right? And I think there's kind of different expectations for different parts of the fan base. And I do think that bowl expectation is every single year. With the year where you didn't go to a bowl, I mean, in my adult life, the Ducks have missed 2 bowls. That's amazing.
In my entire life as a Duck fan, Ryan, they've missed 1 bowl. And that was
So I mean, that's
2016.
kind of like that Blazer playoff record, right? Where they had gone to the playoffs more than any professional team, but what did they get out of it? 1 championship, right? So it's like this idea where I think there's kind of this hope and dream that we could have the type of team year after year after year, with recruiting like you're talking about, Max, with coaching stability, with all the other sort of stuff that you need to kind of create that little dynasty and legacy for a little stretch of time. Because again, so much changes in college football, right? So quickly that, I think you have to get good enough to kind of even have the idea that what you should be getting is into the college football playoffs. So it's kind of hard for me. I kind of sit on the more conservative side a little bit and think that, this year, going into this year, I thought that maybe 8 wins was probably the floor. And, you didn't know what you were going to get with the BYU game. You didn't know what you were going to get with the Georgia game. I expected the loss, but a lot of people were saying maybe you could win, and when you got trounced by them, you turned around, you're like, dude, I hope we beat BYU. And that BYU game was such a turnaround. That was kind of where you first kind of started to see it. And, but, looking at the schedule, the way it sits, their hardest games are still in front of them. Everybody talked about at the beginning of the year. I mean, we did how many of these different shows and all these different conversations in the summertime, right? Talking about all this stuff, right? And we kept saying Utah. We kept talking about Washington maybe, or the Beavs maybe, but everybody said Utah. And, Utah maybe hasn't quite had the season it wanted to, but it's still a good team.
That's still
they're getting healthy.
Team.
And I fear the hell out of the Utes. And
that might be a bigger game than this one.
Oh, it will be for sure. But this game means different. This game now over last year's beatdowns, those back-to-back beatdowns, going to make that Utah game ramp up big time for sure. But the Utah game just hits different than the Washington game. Washington game has so much goddamn tradition. I mean, holy crap! It's families. It's all connected. But this is a situation I think for the Ducks where it could, like Mikey G said, the storybook. Hey, I was talking about the idea of the Disney authors looking at the Duck story already this year. The fact that Dan Lanning gets hired his first games against his former team and all that other stuff. I mean, off the national championship. I mean, there's so many different things that you could talk about there. If they literally end the season and beat Georgia in the national championship after losing in the first game, that's a Disney story. That's that. So I think you don't want to get too ahead of yourself because you don't want to get let down. And true Duck fans have been out here for a long time. Boy, we have been let down, man. Oh, my God. We're glad that the rain falls off a Duck's back because, boy, we've had some rough ones. And the idea that it's just right around the corner, disappointments right there. And you're like, oh, do I want to go see a bowl game where you're going to get drilled and go across the country for that? Not necessarily, because I've been there. I felt that pain. And especially feelings where you think you're going to be in the game, like that goddamn Georgia game. So the idea is that when you get into it and you really are fired up, you want to have that high expectation, but a lot has to happen. Now, 12-team playoff, every year expectation. Because you could have 2 teams out here. You could easily have 2 teams per conference.
That's why 12-team playoffs sucks.
And 2 extras.
That's why 12-team playoffs sucks. These games don't mean as much. Like if you had a 12-team playoff,
Virginia's going one of these years.
Or if you have a 12,
Wake Forest.
When you have a 12-team playoff this year, Oregon doesn't have to beat Utah.
No.
We don't have to beat Utah. What are you talking about?
No.
Utah would still be in the playoff conversation. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but you're going to get 4 teams from the SEC in that thing.
Yeah, that's true. But then you're probably going to have 2 from the Big 10 and 2 from the Big 12 and then a couple Pac-12, 1 ACC.
And then you still have 2 extra.
A group of 5 and a couple. Yeah, it's
going to be a joke. And Notre Dame will be there every year.
Plus the other thing, too, so many of the playoff games have been blowouts because the gap between the teams that can actually win a national championship and the ones that can't is sizable.
And you're still going to have a ranking system because they can't play everybody. They're going to have buys. You're still going to have a top 4 get the bye week or something. So you're still going to have the jockeying.
And by the way, and people are still going to like everyone's like, oh, I want expansion. It'll help this. Like, it's not going to help as many things you want. Number 1.
No.
Number 2, you're saying like, oh, well, then we want to have these conversations about who gets in, who gets out. No, then you're just going to move it to who's number 12 versus who's number 13 and 14.
And we do the same thing in the spring.
So and so could pull the upsets. Like, who's the number 13 team in the country right now? I believe I'm pretty sure it's Utah. Does anyone think Utah can beat Georgia? Anyone? Bueller? No, I didn't think so. Like,
But we do the same thing with the March Madness. They didn't like it at 64. They made it 68. Now it's like we're arguing who's the 70th best team in. Come on, draw the line.
I know.
I think another thing too, and keep getting back to the playoff discussion, but it's an interesting thing just about Oregon at a glance or broadly. As we're getting into the playoff discussion more, you discuss strength of schedule, you discuss some of the non-conference matchups.
Right.
I think I'm seeing some people. Was it Joel Klatt? I think it was Joel Klatt who was like, Oregon, why the heck did you schedule Georgia? And I'm like, because you want to be testing yourself. Like I talk to these recruits and they're like, I want to go to Oregon because I know that I'm going to be tested against the best. And they like to be in those big spotlight games like that because you could be on the other side of it, like last year, where you come away with a win against Ohio State.
You have Duck fans that go across the country to go to Atlanta, and they're in those airports, and they're going from all across the country. And you have Duck fans in Eugene that can't give away a Louisiana Tech ticket in week 2. I'm just telling you, like,
yeah, okay, so
a win's a win. I get it.
I agree with Ryan's point there, and Max, I like what you said about the Ohio State game. I love Joel Klatt. I think he's a really smart, insightful guy. I love listening to his podcast. I think he's dead wrong on college football playoff expansion. I pray that one day I could have the opportunity to talk to him about it. We'll see where life takes me. You never know. But on the Georgia front, he is wrong in asking, like, well, why did you schedule Georgia? Why would you do this? Because although he is correct in saying that if the Ducks had scheduled Hawaii, they'd be in the top 4 of the college football playoff right now. They would be number 4. That is correct. However, that's not the issue that I have. I like that Oregon wanted to go play one of the best teams in the country, the reigning national champs, even though they didn't know it at the time. But the fundamental issue there is not with Oregon wanting to do that. It's with college football scheduling as a whole, which is completely backwards and set primarily by the schools themselves. And there needs to be an independent body that looks at, say, college basketball's model of how you set up great matchups every year and require teams that want to be college football playoff caliber to play good opponents. And I think what you should have is you should have alternating years. This conference plays this conference and this conference plays this conference. And you should have one non-conference game for each team where you are playing the top, 1 against 1, 2 against 2, or 1 against 2, something like that, where, the 7 is playing the 7 from the year before. That way you're ensuring everyone has a quality game that they have to play, and you can't be like Michigan and schedule UConn, Hawaii, and, as Colin Cowher would say, Panera Bread, and say, yeah, look, we went 3-0 in our non-conference slate. Like, whoop-de-doo, congratulations. So I think there's a point there, but I just don't agree with his sentiment, even though it is correct in a sense of, like, if Oregon puts a cupcake in week 1 instead of Georgia, or if they play a middling team like, I don't know, Purdue in the Big Ten or something, then you could have – they never do anything. They can't be Purdue when you don't do anything but pull an upset every now and then. Just my 2 cents. But you could have done that and be there, but I'm just not of that mind. That's just not how I operate. I want the smoke. I want to play the best teams because that day when they beat Ohio State, it's one of the most thrilling days of my life as an Oregon fan.
Sure.
Bar none. I didn't think they'd win. Nobody else did either. They go in, they get a big win, and boom, a team that without that victory is not catapulted into the college football playoff discussion is suddenly right there. Because that's the advantage of it, right? We're getting the downside of it with Georgia this year in that it's holding us back. But the upside of it with Ohio State, if it had not been Ohio State and we'd played Ohio instead at Autzen Stadium, then the Ducks are hovering around the top 10. But the Pac-12 was so down last year, it would have been really hard for them to move up, especially getting those close wins. We would have been a lot like Clemson this year, where we're just scraping by against average teams, and then you play a good one, and you get exposed. So I think there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages to the whole situation. And though I love Klatt, I do not agree with him on that.
All right, well, maybe it's a good time to kind of get our final thoughts on the Washington-Oregon matchup. It's getting a little late, and we just hit the hour mark. So Shout
How many,
out to
how many
everyone.
people in the building right now, Max? How many people we got?
We got 49 people here.
Let's go.
So that's a pretty good showing, especially for how late it is. So
Yeah, right. Thanks for
thank
sticking
you.
with us, people.
Yeah, thanks for
Yes, indeed.
tuning in, you guys. But how about you guys give your thoughts and then I'll wrap it up and we can, say where we can find each other and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I feel good about Oregon in this spot. I feel really good about them at home. Washington's really struggled on the road this year. They lost to Arizona State. They struggled with Cal on the road, and not like an Oregon struggle. Like we have high class struggling problems where the Ducks end up winning the game by 18 or up by 25. Washington was losing in the second half to Cal on the road, and neither of those environments and neither of those teams are on Oregon's level. So I think that gives me a good amount of confidence. I have my number one concern. I'll talk about this a lot on my show tomorrow, or on Friday's show. Actually, tomorrow's a lot of recruiting talk, and I think the biggest concern is, can you get pressure on Michael Penix? If you do, I think Oregon wins comfortably. I still think they're going to win anyway. I'll go 45 to, I think like 45-28, somewhere in that sort of range. I think the Huskies defense has been good at times, but they're pretty reliant on their front four, and I trust Oregon's offensive line against literally anybody in the country.
Yeah, the offensive line is definitely elite for Oregon. I don't know if the Washington defense has really got what they need against Oregon's offense. I think Oregon's offense is just I think Oregon's offense is just cooking right now, and I do think that Penix is going to bring something to the table. I think he's going to throw the ball around, and they've proven it that they like to throw the ball, but they also run the ball. I think it's oftentimes we kind of get lulled to sleep by the majority, and boy, the running game, when they start whipping it, it can get pretty good too. So I think I respect the Huskies. I respect where DeBoer is at right now. I didn't know that they would maybe gain this much traction this fast. The MSU win was huge, but it has turned into maybe not being as big as we thought it was then. But it was still big just to get an out-of-conference win and have that back-to-back win. And they were 11 in the country.
To do it like that, too.
Yeah, they were 11 in the country. They just totally dominated it. So, at home, so I don't know. I love this game, and I always think the rivalry games, it's cliche, but you got to throw the records out. You just got to get after it. You got to strap it up. You got to, really, really jump into these guys. And it's going to be hot. I mean, I have really never felt the energy like I felt last year. I mean, you had Jimmy Lake get fired after that thing. You had the Cristobal thing in the Cristobal thing in the locker room where, he's F-bombing them and saying they're the,
everything that's wrong with football.
Everything that's, I mean, dude, there was some jabs, literal and figuratively, last year. And I think this year, you've got kind of two new coaches that are really pretty solid, that feel like they're going to stick around a while, that got a real good base underneath them, and they brought in good coaching staff. And you also have some guys that have transferred down here, right? You got Junior Adams, you got Taki, and these guys, they said Taki's wearing the Husky shirt underneath his pads this week and stuff. Like, I think it's time to, just embrace this stuff. I think it's what makes college football great. I always say the pageantry of college football is so unique. Yep. Who the hell cares about the goddamn cheerleaders in a pro stadium? And that's ridiculous. It's almost borderline sexual harassment. In college sports, the cheer team is like one of the best things. The band, the cheers, dude, it's part of the whole package. Like, it all goes together. And part of that is rivalry. At least you're having one, maybe two games on the schedule that just hit different. Georgia, Florida, every year is different. They got to play some of these games out of the regular stadiums. They have to go to a different venue that's kind of a bigger venue because they can't even the capacity of some of these games is just awesome. And I tend to think that the Iron Bowl and the Ohio State Michigan game, those are like American traditions almost. Like, they are at the level where they are like reverent, and I look at that game every year, that Civil War game. That's the most important game on the whole schedule to me every year. It's Thanksgiving week. You still got the turkey. I mean, it's like, it's just, there's something about that. And I think that's part of the lure of college football. It's why we love it so much. It feels like family. It feels family. It feels like, that's the Brian Kelly thing when he's in that
Me and
interview
my
with that.
family.
Family. He's got that southern twang all of a sudden. But dude, there's something about college football that's different than all other sports. It's not like going to a Blazer game and cheering on your team. It's not like going to a Mariner game. It's not like going to NFL Stadium, the 12s. No, it's like going to some real home cooking. And these rivalry games are very different, and they hit different, and they feel different. And when you get the win, boy, it is something special, man. I absolutely love it. So, thanks for having us on, man. Thanks so much, Max. It's
You
awesome.
got it. You got it, Ryan. So just
Love
to
what
wrap
you
up,
guys do.
well, I'm happy you've always brought me on your show, and you're incredibly supportive and encouraging. And Spencer's been great having me on his show, coming on my show. So it's just been awesome getting to know you guys and just kind of see all of our stuff just grow as far as YouTube channels and shows and what have you. But final thoughts on Oregon Washington. The more I think about it, I think that the real test just comes on defense. Is Oregon going to be able to get that pressure on Penix? Good alliteration there. But yeah, DJ Johnson, we'll see if he's able to go. Brandon Dorlus is going to be a huge guy that the Ducks need a big game from. But how great would it be to see someone else emerge, rushing the passer? Like, I think this is a perfect breakout, if you want to call it, opportunity for Justin Flo. I know that his season hasn't been going the way that he wants to. He's kind of been hit and miss with some injuries. For him to just be able to just go full pedal to the metal and just like play out of his mind, like a la suplex in his senior year highlights, like that would be pretty sick. And then also we talked about how talented Washington's wide receivers are. How great would it be for Oregon, and how reassuring would it maybe be for Oregon fans if this secondary just has like a lockdown game, multiple picks. Gonzo had 2 picks against Colorado, obviously totally different team. But what I'm saying is they have momentum. So if they can carry that into this week, force some turnovers, make them uncomfortable, get off to a fast start on offense, I think this could be a very comfortable win, like we're saying. But, if you don't make the tackles you're supposed to, make the plays you're supposed to, get off the field on third down. We've been talking about that a lot this year as far as, what the defense needs to do. I think that it's a very, very winnable game, but this is a talented Washington team, and certainly one that I think that has the fireworks to potentially keep up with Oregon if they can't get some really key stops on defense. But I can't wait to be there. Loved everything Ryan said about why college football is so unique. I just love it. It's the best. I wouldn't trade it for anything. High school football is pretty sweet too. I'm obviously getting a lot of that down here in SoCal now, but it's going to be great. We're going to see all the tradition, all the awesome stuff that Eugene has to offer. It's going to be on full display. Tons of recruits coming to town. I might add, for those of you guys that are still here, I'm going to get to work on our visitor list story. I was at Milliken earlier today, and Long Beach wide receiver Jordan Anderson's going to be there. He's a huge 2024 wide receiver. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But before we get out of here, let's go Spencer and then Ryan. Where can people find more of your guys' work in the college football space? Just want to give you a chance to plug that.
Locked On Ducks and Locked On Pac-12 every day, Monday through Friday on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I'm at Smalls_55 on Twitter. DMs always wide open, especially for all of you Duck fans. Appreciate you, and anyone out there who watches my show or listens to my show. I hope you support these guys too, because they are absolutely awesome, integral parts of my show, as you know. And I haven't even known either of you for a full year, and it feels like we are old pals at this point in time.
Family.
Even though we've never met in person, and I wouldn't want it any other way. Grateful as always to be a part of this wonderful, wonderful community we call Duck fans.
It's the flock, baby. We got to fly together, man. Dude, I love it, man. And let me get a first plug for my son. Okay, my son, Darby Winter Photo. Okay, bro, this week he's working for J-Hop. First time he's going to have the field pass. He's going to be on the field, my boy.
That's so
as a junior in high school, he's made it. Looks like we made it. Dude, and he might have it the whole rest of the year, bro. Because the situation is he's a professional now. He got his first senior pictures You got $350 to do pictures for 2 girls.
Oh, dude, yeah, girls will pay buku bucks if
They
do
love
those
the
things right.
pictures, bro. And you just got to be the guy behind the camera. Oh yeah. Oh
Just directing the show.
Okay. I thank you so much, Max. Again, I appreciate you. You know this, Spencer. You know this. Got much love for both you guys and all the other guys in the space, man. I love all those guys. 247 guys. Saw those guys in Colorado. Love all those guys. Everybody who's doing the stuff, man. Crepia. Everybody's doing the thing. Anyway, but Sports Chat 503. That's where it's at, man. But you got to check out the Tuesday show. The Tuesday, I've opened the whole thing up. I did 3 hours last night.
Dude,
Straight.
that's
Straight.
so baller.
So it's like, it's cool, man. It's like StreamYard's hooked it up. Max, you got to I always give Max the shout out for hooking me up with the live stream. I'd never done a live stream until Max told me to do it.
Now you're a pro.
Now I'm loving it. And but I did 3 hours last night and it was awesome. Anybody can come in at any time. You send me the link or send me the message. I send you the link. I can't send the link public or else I get all tons of trolls. That's a thing that I've been dealing with. Yeah. Not great. But it's been fun. Anyway, there's a core group of guys that have come on. A couple, they're building their brand and they're doing their thing, and I absolutely love it. So again, I'm here for the positivity. You know me. I'm just a guy here representing for that '90s Oregon football group that broke through the glass ceiling. We're still here.
Absolutely.
You're our group historian, Ryan.
Right. I'm everybody's group historian. Every group that I'm in, I'm the historian.
All right. Well, great stuff there. If you guys want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter at @mtorresports. That's the fastest way to get all the updates from me on Oregon football recruiting. Really leaning into that. Really important to lock in on the social networks. You can find me on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. If you guys are watching here in the live stream, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future live shows. And then we also have ducksdigest.com where you can find all my written stuff. And then the Ducks Dish podcast. Share the podcast with your friends, with your family, with other Duck fans. You know the rules. But we're going to get on out of here. Huge thank you to Spencer and Ryan for hopping on. Really glad we got to make this work on a huge week for Oregon football and Husky Hate Week. So we'll see you guys at the game on Saturday in Eugene. And until next time, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.